For the next week or two, we're going to talk about graphing parabolas, which is something we reviewed a little bit in Mod 0, but we're going to talk about some different forms that you can graph in. Like today, we're going to talk about factored form. So first of all, a very quick review of what we relearned in Mod 0 is that the graph of every quadratic is what we call a parabola. So every graph looks something like this. It's that U-shaped. It's either a kind of a regular U shape or it's the upside down U shape. And basically, you can tell which one it is by looking at what we call A. If A is greater than 0 or positive, you get the U shape. And if A is less than 0 or negative, you get the upside down U shape. Now, when I say A, what we're talking about is the number in front of the x squared. So like if my parabola, if my equation starts with 2x squared, it's opening up. If it starts with negative 2x squared, opens down. So this is what we did in Module 0. We did what's called standard form, or what's sometimes called general form, and that's when the terms are just listed out. You have the x squared part first, you have the x part second, and then you have your constant part, which is the part with no x at all, last. And you just list them out in order from first to last. And again, that number A, that's the number that tells you if it opens up or down, the one in front of x squared. Now today, we're going to look at something called factored form. And we just did factoring last week. So factoring turns it into factors. So like this x minus p right here, that's a factor. And this x minus q right here, those are your factors, which is why it's called factored form. Now the A out front is the same as this A up here. So same rule, that number out in front in factored form tells you whether the parabola opens up or down. All right, so let's take a look at this example here. I said this is a graph of y equals negative x plus 1 times x plus 3. That's in factored form. You can see the factors in parentheses. Now the first thing, before I worry about the factors, the first thing I do is I notice this negative sign right here. And a negative sign by itself basically means a negative 1, but it is negative. And that tells me that the parabola opens down, which you can see in the picture it does. It's that upside down U shape that does this. Now the other two things I want you to notice on here, what are marked on there as zeros. 0 is another word for x-intercept. So what you notice is it has a 0 or an x-intercept at negative 1, and it has another x-intercept at 3. Now let's compare that to our equation. If you look at the factors, the first factor is x plus 1. And the first x-intercept is negative 1. The second factor is x minus 3, and the second x-intercept is positive 3. Those are the same numbers, but with the opposite sign. When our factor has a plus 1, the x-intercept is negative 1. And when our factor has a minus 3, the x-intercept is positive 3. And that's going to be our rule for graphing. So in factored form, and this is the same factored form we saw 2 slides ago, y equals x, or y equals a times x minus p times x minus q. These two numbers here, p and q, give you the x-intercepts. So this number here and this number here give you the x-intercepts. All you have to do is change the plus or minus sign. And that's why in the formula we put minus instead of plus. Usually if you're looking at a formula and it says minus something instead of plus something, that means it wants you to use the opposite sign. It means it wants you to change the sign on it. So basically factored form is telling you if you just change the sign on p and q, the numbers in the factors, it gives you the x-intercepts. And then of course, what we said earlier, this number out front, a, tells you whether the parabola opens up or down. And with just those two things, with just what I circled in green and then red, we can very easily draw quick sketches of graphs in factored form, and that's what we want to do today. So here's a couple examples. I said without using Desmos. I want you to do this just by yourself without using a calculator or a graphing calculator. Let's sketch this graph right here. Well, it's very simple. And remember, a sketch doesn't have to be perfect. A sketch just means, get the main things right. It doesn't have to be perfect. So what I would do very quickly and very easily, I would look right here. My first factor is x minus 4. So I change the sign on it. My first x-intercept is positive 4. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right. I'm going to put a point right there. There's my x-intercept. Okay. Now my second factor has a plus 2. So to get the x-intercept, I change the sign. It's negative 2. So I'm going to count left 1, 2 from the middle. And I'm going to put a point right there. So there's my two x-intercepts. One at negative 2 and one at positive 4. Now the last place I look is here. This is a positive number, which means the parabola is opening up. So what I want to do is draw a parabola that opens up and goes through those 2 points. So what I usually do is start with just a U shape going from one of the 2 points to the other. You'll basically kind of start with something like this, and then just continue it on through the points like that. And there's our sketch. Doesn't have to be perfect, that's what sketch means. But what I'm looking for is number 1, that you have the x-intercepts in the right place, and number 2, that it's opening in the right direction, either up or down. Those are the 2 things we're focusing on right now. Let's do one more example. Same type of question, same directions. We're going to, without using a graphing calculator or Desmos or any help at all, we're going to sketch this graph right here. And I'm going to do it the exact same way. My first factor is x plus 3. So my first x-intercept is negative 3. So from the middle, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 to the left and put a point right there. And my second factor has a plus 6. So my second x-intercept is negative 6. So from the middle, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to put a point right there. So I very clearly marked the 2 x-intercepts. They were easy to find. I just looked at the factors and changed the signs. And again, just like the last example, the last place I look is right here. This is a negative number, so it's going to open down. So I'm going to draw the upside down U shape from one point to the other. Something like that. Then remember, don't just stop there. A parabola keeps going. So I'm going to keep extending through those 2 points and draw the arrows like that. So you can see how much easier it is. When we did graphing in standard form or in general form, there aren't a lot of shortcuts, and it took some work to do it. But when we do graphing in factored form, to get a sketch, it's very, very simple. You can get the x-intercepts just by looking at it. You can tell if it opens up or down just by looking at it. And that's really all we're doing right now for a sketch. So you don't really need to do any work. You don't need to solve for x. You don't need to add to both sides of an equation or anything like that. You just need to know the rules, and you need to know what each piece of information is telling you.